Hi, and welcome back to Plane Legacy. I'm Bill, and today we're taking a look at a U.S. Air Force light bomber, reconnaissance, and electronic countermeasures airframe. Derived from the Douglas A-3 Skywarrior used by the U.S. Navy, this aircraft underwent several changes before entering service with the Air Force in 1956. Specifically, we're looking at the RB-66B destroyer. In this episode, we'll take a brief look at the exterior of the aircraft, briefly talk about the differences between it and the A-3 Skywarrior, and how the RB-66B and similar variants were used by the U.S. Air Force. Plane Legacy brings you the less common vintage aircraft filmed at museums from around the United States, highlighting the contributions to aviation of both the aircraft and the people associated with them. If you enjoy aviation history like I do, then let's get started with today's episode. In the early 1950s, the Air Force took note of the Navy's carrier-based strategic bomber, the A-3 Skywarrior, originally destined to be armed with nuclear weapons. The A-3, however, could be equipped with conventional weapons, such as the bombs and mines carried by the Skywarrior in Vietnam. The Air Force approached Douglas for what would become the B-66. However, instead of a high-altitude nuclear deterrent that could be carrier-based, the Air Force wanted a land-based variant deployed for low-level operations as a light bomber and reconnaissance airframe. The Air Force had in mind from the very beginning that the B-66 would be both a bomber and reconnaissance platform. By the time the Air Force requirements were met, significant changes were made to the airframe by the time it first flew on June 28, 1954. Wings, fuselage, and landing gear were all redesigned based on requests from the Air Force. The B-66 did retain the three-man crew, however the Air Force models were equipped with ejection seats. In their book, Jet Bombers, From the Messerschmitt Me-262 to the Stealth B-2, Bill Gunston and Peter Gilchrist state that while the B-66 may have derived from the A-3, it was essentially a new design. These authors and others have commented that some of these changes may not have been necessary. One example often cited is the change in jet engines from the Pratt & Whitney J57 to the Allison J71 power plant. The J57 was already in use by the Air Force, meaning maintenance crews were already trained to service the engine, and presumably there were ample supplies of spare parts. The Allison is said to have produced less power, required design changes to the aircraft for it and accessories like hydraulic pumps and generators to all be repositioned, and it had lower fuel efficiency, all for no appreciable gain. In any event, the result was an aircraft 75 feet long that featured a high-mounted swept wing with a 1-degree anhedral or downward angle and a 72-foot 6-inch wingspan. The trailing edge of the wing was equipped with both inboard and outboard flaps, along with spoilers and ailerons. The leading edge was equipped with slats, as shown here. A conventional tail featured mid-mounted elevators with a similar swept-back design and a 10-degree dihedral or upward angle. The large ventral stabilizer topped out at 23.5 feet. The B-66 and its variants featured a tricycle undercarriage with the main gear spaced about 11 feet apart, which fully retracted. As noted, the aircraft was powered by a pair of Allison J71 turbojet engines mounted under each wing. First was the A-11 and then later the A-13 variant of the Allison J71. These engines produced 10,200 pounds thrust each. The RB-66B seen here is said to have had a maximum speed of 585 miles per hour and a range of 1,800 miles. The B-66 was a bomber that could carry a 15,000-pound bomb load internally, but the Air Force tired quickly of their tactical bomber variant, cutting down the number of aircraft ordered by about half to just 72 aircraft produced. The RB-66B shown here was designed as an all-weather photo reconnaissance variant, and about 149 were produced. Like the bomber variant, the reconnaissance aircraft were armed with a rearward-facing, radar-assisted, remotely operated turret containing two 20mm cannon. Instead of traditional bombs, the RB-66B could be loaded with up to 8,044 pounds of photo flash bombs. Variants of the B-66 included signals intelligence and electronic countermeasures options. The RB-66C and later EB-66C and E models were built for electronic warfare. Their bomb bay or camera bay was converted to house 4 crew members and specialized equipment. The EB-66C and E were RB-66Cs with more highly specialized electronic countermeasures and electronic intelligence equipment. The electronic countermeasures versions were unarmed and featured antennas and wingtip pods and a ventral pod. If you're familiar with the book and/or film Bat-21, the account of Lieutenant Colonel ISEAL Gene Hamilton's survival after being shot down in Vietnam, it was an EB-66 that he ejected from. A WB-66 weather reconnaissance variant was also produced, and a pair of these were used for advanced testing by NASA as the X-21A. B-66s were reaching the Air Force fleet as a replacement for the Douglas A-26 Invader in the mid-1950s. The bomber and its reconnaissance variants were deployed to bases in the United Kingdom and West Germany. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, RB-66Cs were deployed to MacDill Air Force Base with the 363rd Tactical Reconnaissance Wing. B-66 variants operated in Vietnam, conducting photo reconnaissance and electronics missions. Night missions for the RB-66Bs featured photo flash bombs. A preset delay in the device was set before the flight, based on the anticipated altitude from which the bombs would be dropped. These devices contained a magnesium-based flash powder that yielded 500 million candle power for about a fifth of a second, and were timed to detonate at an optimal altitude to light up the ground to be photographed. Cameras positioned in the camera bay were synchronized with the flash bombs to obtain photographs of the target area. Daytime missions were conducted with a combination of standard vertical and oblique cameras. Cameras could be swapped in and out of a rack in the camera bay as needed for each specific type of mission. The unarmed EB-66 electronics missions in Vietnam detected radar signals which were being used to guide MiGs and direct SAM and AAA sites. They jammed North Vietnamese radars during airstrikes by Air Force bombers, and flew Pathfinder missions for aircraft like the F-105 Thunder Chief and F-4 Phantom when targets were obscured by overcast. The aircraft featured in today's episode can be viewed at the National Museum of the United States Air Force. A veteran of the war in Vietnam, this RB-66B was delivered to the museum in 1970. Thank you for watching today's episode. I hope you enjoyed seeing this variant of a line of bombers and reconnaissance aircraft. If so, please consider providing a like to the episode and subscribe to see more aircraft like this that tend to get overlooked. Be sure to click the notification bell to be notified when new episodes are available. If you had any connection with the B-66 and its variants, including the A3, leave a comment about what you think its legacy is. And we'll see you next time right here on Plain Legacy.